The clandestine, red crackle that ate the exterior shell of my armor's visage was deafening, enveloping my helmet with a thunderous roar. Taken aback as the energy blast flowed across my steel faceplate, I stumbled several steps back and tumbled downwards, destroying the ground beneath and causing a titanic shatter that rippled through the ash-ridden, malformed valley I now found myself in. Stumbling to regain my balance in my suit of T-45, I vaguely scouted my surroundings. The guns had stopped, but I was alone. Having fallen a good 60 feet down, my actuators had started screaming out in pain, each scrape and tear correlating to even the smallest movement, telling me that I needed to find somewhere to repair myself. I was safe, for now. Extending my forefinger upwards towards my visor and dusting off the lenses, I was sure that my helmet's seal was intact, and that the radiation wouldn't claim me like it had so many others. It had been months since our base was destroyed in the Bering Strait, and day by day we have struggled to reach the string of pre-war military installations in northeastern Alberta. Our mission in the post-apocalyptic hellscape of the northwestern Commonwealth has been nothing short of tragic, with only the remnants of our organisation left to undertake the migration of the lost, as coined by locals. Despite the odds, we'll push on, as we always have. My head's on fire, thoughts rippling up and down, out and around and making it difficult to breathe, let alone see. Finding a small cave, I hunched over and crawled in, lugging my Watts 2000 laser rifle close to my battered chest. Upon further inspection, the cave seemed to expand into a larger mouth, almost like a gaping maw. Unusual, as I haven't heard any growls, screams, or cries of terror. Almost seemed like a paradise compared to the usual wasteland antics that are to be expected. Hauling arse, as my late commander would state frequently, I trudged down to the opening, straightening my posture with each step down. Surely there was no way to get back up from the ravine. Was I too hasty in hiding? A coward, perhaps. It meant nothing now. I couldn't do anything. Separated from the rest of my fellow knights, I was vulnerable, weakened, and alone, ripe for the slaughter. As I walked, the cave floor slowly turned from an earthy clang to instead a wet crunch under my metal soles. Readying my rifle up to my chest and pointing the barrel towards the dark unknown, I reassured myself that if anything here had hostile intention, I'd already most likely be dead. The cave became suddenly illuminated, with several cracks erupting out of the bleak darkness, followed by haggard cackles. Rotating my torso left, 2 of the shots cascaded into the tip of my right shoulder, with the rest flowing past. Quickly returning to my previous position, I fired once, lighting up the dark tunnel with a flash of red radiance, and I heard a deafening screech as my shot connected with a dark veiled humanoid figure, before the body briefly pulsated and then exploded inside out into a marriage of charred intestines and seared ash. The conflict had ignited. Whatever assaulted my fellow brothers and I was most likely in the same cave formation that I haphazardly waltzed into. Hope gleamed across my mind, followed by a sense of pride. Brother Mathanos wouldn't be dragging me out of the trouble again, that much is assured. The only way back to my brothers is through whatever these things are. Far from human, yet retaining a similar contorted form. Knowing that the shots would draw more attention, I barreled into a sprint through the dark. It was hard on the armour, the damage from before growing ever more prevalent as each roaring connection to the ground spattered the wet, dark mud upwards onto my greaves. 3 more targets identified, each turning their heads in shock as they heard my approach. The cave was far more lit now. The dark, damp and dilapidated tunnel turned into a gateway to a well-lit cavernous ravine full of torches, lanterns and candles, each arranging a sick, almost heretical form of harmony, perfectly mirroring the jagged iron that strutted out of the various wooden idols that dotted the interior of the subterranean complex. Firing at the farthest target from my person, my shot connected with the base of the humanoid's neck, severing its disgusting head from its mangled body in one fell swoop, causing a loud burst of steam to rise up quickly from the cauterized stump. The 2 others turned to shoot, but it was too little too late. Even if they had managed to fire on me, their trinkets would prove useless against Brotherhood armor. Having closed the distance, I took my left hand off my laser rifle and clenched it into a fist and pivoted myself to punch one of the other veiled figures. The blow connected, and the crunch of marrow meeting steel alongside the wet burst of crimson mist easily drowned out the resulting scream of agony that ensued. With 1 target left, I regained my footing and raised my right leg upwards, crunching it down with all my armour could muster on the last assailant's boot. With the beast's foot completely destroyed, it screamed out to hell, raising my torso and head backwards before jolting my skull forward into the creature's face. I caused an explosive instantaneous death. Wiping the shards of bone and brain from my lenses, I pressed on, determined to rejoin my group. I felt pity for my weapon. Such an article of splendour and technological fantasy should not have to sully and degrade itself by having to deal with subhuman monstrosities. But few other firearms provide such cleansing light. My goal is a simple one, yet hard to achieve. Scanning the ravine with my blurred gaze, I determined that there was no way to exit but to travel down further, and to follow the dimly lit torches that paved the way to a great ramp that extended all the way down into the ravine and into a gigantic scrap steel complex. Taking a moment for myself, I stood in silence, and by removing a torch from its concrete cage, I used it to illuminate the various parts of my armour. My view being inhibited from my inability to exit and properly review my armour's condition, I could only see my legs and small parts of the frontal section. Despite the mechanical groans and protests that exuded from falling such a great distance and down into these series of caves, the armour seemed to be fine and still in good condition. Fingers crossed, I hope that the same could be said for the back section of my person. In this brief and sullen period of reflection, the previous events became clearer. Discarding the torch by extinguishing it with my palm, I threw the remains to the side and continued down the ramp to my objective. What was I shot by? Another laser rifle? Any ballistic weapon would have caused me no harm, let alone cause me to stumble. The red glow filled my mind, its radiance shattering me as I remembered its impact, just as it had before. But these monstrosities, I've only seen them carry crude pipe rifles. Certainly none of the foes I previously encountered had anything close to that form of technology. The surroundings confirmed my prognosis, as in my descent down the ramp, I could make out the crude figure paintings, intermixed with strange murals and runic symbols. At the conclusion of the ramshackle ramp, which, suffice to say, I'm impressed it could hold my burdensome weight, I came upon a large and mail-fit gate. As I neared it, it began to hum with a low, ominous harmony. Punching it, my left arm travelled directly through, and radiant blue light travelled all across my armour and danced around the exterior of my body. A crude lightning trap, jury-rigged to the other side of the gate. Had I waited and been less decisive in my course of action, the resulting blast most likely would have caused my armour grievous harm. Pulling my arm back through the hole, I extended my arm and ripped a large section of the scrap wall away, revealing the other side. Bright white light ensued, causing me a moment of surprise as my lenses adjusted to the change. Inspecting the piece of metal I ripped off, it lengthened up to be around 2 feet of metal, with several hastily constructed capacitors laden to its back. Throwing it to the floor and kicking my way through the gate, I pressed on and into the light. Whoever or whatever resides here most likely built this gate as a part of an elaborate defense network. Perhaps caution is the best tool I can employ. As I strode forwards, renewing my zeal with thoughts of valor and victory over death, I drove onwards inside my metal sarcophagus. Looking down whilst I neared the source of the white lights, I checked into a reinforced satchel strapped and bolted to my power armor. Opening the large satchel briefly, I counted 10 microfusion cells.